All right, welcome back to Overtime Arcade. I'm Charlie, and this is part 2 of the Joust restoration series. Now, as you saw in part 1, we're currently working to deconvert and restore an original Williams Joust arcade cabinet from the early 1980s, and boy is it going to be a ton of work. In part 1, really all we did was sort of, take an overview of the project, see what we got cut out for us, and we started the disassembly process. So we stripped a lot of the parts out, the monitor, the JAMA harness, all that stuff, got it out of there. So we had essentially a blank canvas to start working on with this project. In part 2, there's a couple things that I want to do. Sort of most notably, this game had been converted at some point to an SNK Street Smart, which is sort of a late 80s JAMA game that nobody really cares about. And we want to obviously convert it back to a Joust. It's got a ton of SNK Street Smart artwork on it that we want to remove. I've got this really nice control panel overlay, which is a reproduction made by this old game that I want to put on the control panel and start, assembling it back together. But we're going to have to take the Street Smart one off before we can do that and clean up all the adhesive, the 40-year-old glue, all that sort of stuff. I also want to take off the cabinet side art. There's decals from Street Smart on the side of the cabinet that we want to strip off as well. And there's kind of a mystery going on with the control panel itself that we're going to investigate, which might be something kind of unique and cool with this cabinet. And down here in the basement, there's a couple things also to point out here. So the games have been on a ton. It's the holidays right now. I'm off of work. The kids are off of school, so we've been playing a lot of games down here. And a couple things I've noticed. The Robotron marquee light is out, so we're going to have to deal with that at some point. The Tempest Cabaret marquee light has been flickering quite a bit, so that might need some attention too. And it's hard to tell in the video, but my jittery vector issue is back with the Tempest, so that might be something that we need to figure out. And little things, little annoyances, like the underlays for the coin rejects on the Play Choice 10 have sort of moved a little bit, so I want to take those apart, put them back together, and get them centered. So, but that'll be some work for a future video, sort of some ordinary maintenance just to keep these games in tip-top shape. So yeah, let's head out to the garage. I want to take a look at that control panel, strip that old control panel overlay off, strip that old side art off, and we'll make some progress. So if that sounds good, let's go.
Overtime!
Okay, if you saw the photos that I posted to the Claw forums, Facebook, Twitter, and elsewhere, you know that we may have encountered something a little bit unusual here with this Joust control panel. So as first pointed out in a YouTube comment by Brad Radell, and also discussed subsequently with Brad and Lonnie McDonald, both who know a ton about Williams games, especially Joust, this Joust control panel and Joust cabinet may have come originally with optical joysticks. So the typical Joust control panel that you'll find, basically anywhere, is a two-way joystick, so you can only move left and right to sort of move the ostrich or the stork that you're flying left or right, and then you hit the flap button to make it fly. So it's only a two-way joystick, and typically that's with the same kind of two-way joystick that you would find in Defender. It's got a leaf switch in there and a restrictor that only lets it move, left and right, and there's just a small kind of oval slot cut into the control panel. And, that's what I assumed was with this Joust and this Joust control panel originally. So if we look at the buttons here, obviously these are the original, player 1 and player 2 start buttons. This should be the original, flap buttons for both player 1 and player 2. And I believe these two on both sides were added by an operator. And I assumed that this sort of, joystick hole was cut out when the Joust was converted into SNK Street Smart, and that original sort of oval slot was expanded to accommodate sort of a normal four-way joystick. But Brad, when he saw this video and thought, hey, that looks a lot like what the optical joystick version of a Joust control panel looks like, because he owns one of them. So like I mentioned, most Jousts came with that mechanical leaf switch, that two-way leaf switch, but a very small number of Jousts came with an optical joystick. So rather than leaf switches, it used optical encoders to detect the movement. These were also used by Williams in, I believe, Bubbles and Sinistar, which came after Joust. And the conventional wisdom, and what you'll find in the CLOV database entry for Joust, is that the optical joysticks were used at the beginning of the Joust production run, and then very quickly Williams switched to using the mechanical leaf switches, which are simpler and cheaper. But there's been some speculation that actually the leaf switches came first, the leaf switch joysticks came first, and the optical joysticks came later, later in the production run. And if you see again the inspection stamp in my control panel, it's dated February 18th, 1983, which would be relatively late in the Joust production run. So yeah, there's been some speculation that the optical joysticks came later. And the most compelling piece of evidence to me to support that is, I believe it was Yellow Dog, Ken Graham, rest in peace, he was a former Williams programmer and spent years sort of in the community helping people restore Williams cabinets. He pointed out that in the flyers for the Joust cabinet that Williams put out, to advertise the game for sale to operators and arcade owners, that sort of thing, those photos clearly show a Joust with the leaf switches and not the optical joysticks. And he said, hey, if Williams used the optical joysticks early, then those are the ones that would have appeared in the flyers, not leaf switches if those came later. Also, other folks who have found Jousts with optical joysticks have had, early 1983 inspection stamps and, later serial numbers. So that's a little bit more evidence that, the optical joysticks came later. Plus those other games that Williams used optical sticks, Bubbles and Sinistar, came after Joust was released. So looking at this, control panel here, a couple other things that I noticed that suggest to me that, this was an optical joystick panel. There aren't the sort of normal, screw holes that you would expect to see for mounting the leaf switch version of the joystick. So another thing I noticed that suggests to me that this control panel came with optical sticks originally is I purchased from Arcade Shop some reproduction, two-way joysticks in anticipation of this project. And this is what the base plate looks like. So it sort of fits, and I've got the control panel upside down. It kind of fits into that slot cut into the control panel, and the joystick would be coming up from down below, and there's sort of leaf switches and everything is up here. And it fits into the notch cut into the control panel, and it's clearly much wider than this hole that's in the control panel. So by at least half an inch, if not more. So it's not like this slot was originally here that this sort of joystick base plate fit into, and then it was expanded to accommodate this hole. This hole has never been wider than what it is, right here, and this is the same sort of thing on this side. So again, that's evidence to me that this control panel has never had these two-way joysticks in them. So I don't know about you, but I think that's interesting. So the challenging thing here is those optical joysticks are incredibly rare, right? They only come up for sale maybe once every couple of years. The last set that I saw that sold was over $400. So who knows if I'm going to be able to find a set of optical Joust joysticks to fit this control panel and kind of make it, authentic and as original as possible. One thought I had was, well, maybe I can throw these, regular, leaf switch two-way joysticks in, but as you can see, they won't fit because the slot is too wide for the hole in the panel, and I don't want to cut it out and make it wider. So maybe what I can do is actually modify the base plate and kind of cut this down, cut the metal down to make it, narrow enough where it'll slide right in there, but we'll see about that. So, interesting sort of discovery here if this is actually the case. I don't know for sure. I don't know if anyone will ever be able to know for sure, but, interesting nevertheless. And so if anyone out there has a lead on some, Joust optical joysticks, please let me know. So in the meantime, what I want to do is, pull this, Street Smart control panel overlay off of the control panel, and then we can start looking at, you know, bondoing up these additional holes that have been cut in, and yeah, maybe cutting this joystick base plate to fit into the slot. At least use them temporarily until I can find some optical sticks to put into this control panel. So I'm going to use my heat gun here and a scraper, you know, basically trying to melt the glue as much as possible to be able to peel off this control panel. So let me get the tripod set up for that, and we will get started. Okay, so like I said, this is just a cheap heat gun that I got off of eBay, I think, you know, really, really inexpensive. And I'm going to use it to melt the glue to try to help make it easy to take this control panel overlay off. It's got this sort of scraper attachment that I've put on. I also have a separate scraper. I don't think I've ever had to do this before, especially not on a Williams sort of wooden control panel. So we're just going to give it a go and see if it works. One more thing I'm going to mention is I've removed everything out of the way that could potentially be affected by this heat gun that I don't want to get all hot. You know, this does blow very, very hot air. It's a lot hotter than like a blow dryer, that sort of thing. So I've moved everything out of the way that could potentially be damaged. And yeah, that'll give me sort of more space to operate. What a disgusting mess. That took me over 25 minutes to get all that off. We got most of it off. There are some remnants here. A heck of a lot of glue, which I was expecting. We're gonna have to come back over that, you know, probably with Goof Off or Goo Gone, something like that, to get all that glue off. And yeah, it is very sticky, so I can almost pick the thing up with the glue just sticking to my gloves. Not bad for, you know, 30, 40 years. Another thing I wasn't really expecting is this metal surface. So, you know, I've never stripped a control panel overlay off of a Williams control panel, but I assumed the whole thing was, you know, just one piece of wood. Looks like there's some, right here, there's a screw that's stripped. I don't know if somebody tried to take this off at some point and failed, or what's going on there. So I don't know if this is normal for Williams control panels. Let me do some research about that. But yeah, we got, and look at that mess over there of melted plastic. So went about as well as I expected, and yeah, we're gonna have to hit this with some Goof Off or Goo Gone to get all the glue and all the remnants of the control panel overlay off. But so far, I'd say it was a success. Okay, I looked into it, and Joust is supposed to have a steel plate on top of the wooden control panel, so this is normal. I didn't know that. Learn something new every day. So I'm not worried about that. One thing though, the inside here, there are supposed to be T-nuts in these holes that the optical joystick's mounted into, and as you can see, they are not in there. I don't really see any sign of them. I mean, I don't know. So if they were there originally, like they were supposed to be for the optical joysticks, they were previously removed, maybe as part of the conversion process. So yeah, we don't have them. So we are going to have to fill these extra holes that have been drilled. So I guess this is how you would normally look at the control panel. So we're going to have to fill these, you know, 2 holes, 2 extra holes on either side. I'm not really going to worry about it's heavy. I'm not really going to worry about the steel, kind of, you know, replacing filling the hole in the steel. I will cut some sort of pieces of plywood, almost like dowels, and kind of plug them, and then we'll smooth that all out with Bondo and everything after. Obviously, I take some Goof Off and get rid of all this gunk and residue. The other thing, though, for the 4 holes that are supposed to be here for the player 1, player 2 start, and the 2 flap buttons, they're essentially supposed to be kind of double drilled, or I guess maybe you would call this like countersunk. So rather than the button being the same width and kind of going all the way through the control panel, there's sort of the, you know, halfway through the hole, there's kind of another smaller hole. It's hard to describe. So we're going to have to plug it sort of half depth with wood, and then drill a smaller hole through that sort of second level. And that's kind of how the button, the leaf switch button, is supposed to mount in these. So that'll be some work, but yeah, shouldn't be too bad. While I've got the heat gun out, I want to try to remove this Street Smart artwork from the side of the cabinet. We get into the tripod over here. Here we go. I want to be careful, though. I'm still hoping to be able to preserve you know, the original stenciled artwork if it's there. So I'm going to use the lower heat setting on the heat gun, and hopefully that'll be enough to get the, come on, gimbal. That'll be enough to get the side art kind of giant sticker off of the cabinet. So we'll give it a go with that and see if it works. Okay, that came off, I would say, relatively easily. Certainly a lot easier than the control panel. You know, obviously the side art decal is a lot thinner than the control panel overlay. It was also a lot more pliable, and it didn't have the, you know, sort of super heavy duty adhesive holding it on. Yeah, a couple of things I noticed. So this red paint is very soft. The heat gun kind of melted and went right through it a couple of times. And I don't know if you can quite tell, it's sort of most noticeable right here. Can you see this sort of silhouette? This is the beak of the ostrich. This is the head, back of the head. This is the eye. I can see the Joust side art, sort of the shape of the stencil poking through, which gives me some hope here. I kind of lose it going down here, and I don't see the jousting weapon sticking up. But clear as day. I don't know if it's showing up on camera, but I can see the head of the ostrich right there. So yeah, that confirms, you know, if nothing else, that this is or was originally a Joust cabinet. So I'm excited to start stripping off this paint and seeing if we can recover the original stenciled artwork. I'm going to go and take the decal off the other side of the cabinet. I'll do that off camera, and then I'll be right back. All right, the decal on the other side came off even easier than the first one. And you can kind of see the original Joust side art here a little bit better. So again, here is the head or skull of the ostrich. And then you can follow the lines of the neck down all the way down to here. And here's even the Joust weapon, I guess the lance kind of coming up into the black paint. Coming over here, you can see the plume of the knight's helmet. And farther on down, sort of in this area, you can start to see some lines, I guess, from the body of the ostrich. So that's great. So looking forward to stripping this paint off. I was thinking about maybe starting that process tonight, but it's just too dang cold, single digits. I didn't really want to mess with that. But it should be warming up quite a bit in the next couple of days, so we should be able to do that relatively soon. I've got the cabinet up on the sawhorses because I wanted to put leg levelers onto the cabinet to, you can see the bottom's been chewed up a little bit. And I don't really think this is water damage as much as just sort of being in direct contact with the ground and being dragged around, messed up. We'll fix this up with Bondo, get that looking good again. So I wanted to install, new leg levelers to get the cabinet off of the ground. But then I noticed that this sort of blocking piece, that has the T-nut that kind of holds the threaded leg leveler in place is missing from the other four corners of the cabinet. So we're going to have to replace that. We'll sort of make new ones. Hopefully I can find T-nuts that fit the leg levelers that I've got. So that's going to have to wait, unfortunately. So the last thing I want to do in this episode is hit this control panel with Goof Off. Let's get the camera sort of set up for that. So I've got a small can of Goof Off here, which I've had for forever. Hopefully this will be enough. I've never done a job as big as this before. There's a bunch of residue, stickiness and kind of pieces of the control panel overlay. And in a couple of spots, I did sort of take little chunks of the wood up with the old control panel overlay, and hopefully the Goof Off won't sort of react poorly to that, bare wood. But yeah, so I've got some rags, which are just, the sleeves I ripped off of old t-shirts. So let's get to work removing all of this old gummed up adhesive. All right, so I am making progress. This stuff is coming up. It's all gummy and just nasty, gross, sticky mess. It reminds me of like the ectoplasm from Ghostbusters movies, but I think it's working. I feel like I am taking off the adhesive. What's left behind is a little bit rough, but we'll be able to, I think, address this with some sanding later on. And hopefully I'm not removing the sort of, varnish finish coating on this. But yeah, this is kind of slow going, so I'm going to keep at it and then check back in and show you how things are going later. Okay, that was even more work than I was expecting. I know a lot of people have posted online horror stories of removing the adhesive off of old Williams control panels, and they were not kidding. So, I went to town on sort of the first two sides, and, this one I think I got pretty good, but there's still quite a bit, especially if you look at different angles, there's still quite a bit of adhesive still on, and it's still very tacky. I ended up running out of that small bottle of Goof Off that I was working with. So I ran out, grabbed a bigger bottle. I was going to buy the big gallon jug, but then I saw this stuff, which is a gel. The normal Goof Off kind of runs all over. I figure with the gel, it'll make, better contact for longer with the adhesive that I'm trying to remove, and maybe that'll do a better job sort of penetrating it and loosening it up. People post all kinds of, different chemicals that they recommend using that they've had success with, not all of which is readily available, at least not in my area, and, maybe has been discontinued, who knows. So we're going to try this gel. I haven't touched the metal side yet. I'm also interested in removing the metal panel, which has a bunch of screws, although one of them is stripped really bad, and sort of seeing what's underneath. I think my current plan of attack is I'm going to fill the extra holes, and I have some doweling for that, some wood dowel for that. It's an 1.25 inch diameter. I'm going to plug the extra holes and probably just skim coat with Bondo over the top. I'm not going to worry about repairing the holes in the metal sheet. And we'll also sort of, like I mentioned, fix the damaged sort of recessed holes for the normal buttonholes. But I also need to figure out how to remount new T-nuts for the optical sticks, and then we will do that, and then I'll be able to easily install new optical sticks if and when I ever find them, and then in the meantime we'll cut down those reproduction leaf switch joystick assemblies that I got from Arcade Shop, and sort of cut them down so that they will fit into the hole without modifying the control panel, and just screw those into the wood. So that should be okay. So yeah, let's come in with this. Again, this is Goof Off Adhesive Gunk Remover Gel. It even says gunk in the name. And I've got, it comes in a spray bottle, but I figure that's going to be hard to control and get it to go places that I want it to go and not where I don't want it to go. So we're going to open this up. Look at that. It's starting to get everywhere already. So we're going to apply that directly, directly to the panel, and I'm dropping it. It's getting everywhere. Exactly what I wanted to avoid. And at least this stuff smells a lot better than the regular Goof Off. It's got like a orangey sort of smell to it. And I'm going to use a bristle brush to kind of, apply it all over, spread it all over. And we'll give it a couple of minutes and see what that does. All right, that looks good. I'm going to let this soak in for several minutes, and then we'll come back and see what sort of results we're getting. And while we're waiting for that Goof Off Adhesive Gunk Remover Gel to soak in, I want to take the coin door off of the cabinet just to avoid this getting kind of messed up while we eventually strip the paint off the side of the cabinet, and it'll give us an opportunity to work on the coin door. So the first thing I'm going to do is come in and remove this grounding strap, just so that we're free of that. All right, we'll do this without dropping the washer. All right, okay. And we'll just replace this nut. There we go. And then the coin door itself, where the frame is held onto the cabinet just by some, what is this, 7/16 nuts. So that one was on pretty loose. So get that one, and we'll take it out of the frame. There we go. And one on this side. I'm guessing these have been removed before, how loose these nuts are on the carriage bolts. We'll put them on just to keep them together. Here's a little pro tip. When you're putting away nuts and bolts that you want to reuse later, thread the nut onto the bolt so you keep them together. Save yourself a minute down the road trying to figure out which nut went to which bolt, etc., etc. And don't lose it, Charlie. Okay, and then this last one on top. This one's going to be harder because it's now got all the weight of the cabinet on it. Here we go. Not the cabinet, it's got all the weight of the coin door on it. There we go. All right, and there's our coin door, free and clear. It says tested. Oh, and this was set for, tested with 984 tokens and US 25-cent coins, also known as quarters. All right, we'll put that to the side. Grab these carriage bolts and nuts for safekeeping. And it's been several minutes, so I think we can come back and see what's going on with this control panel. Okay, so the instructions say to use a cloth to remove it, but instead I'm going to use a scraper, and I picked up a wider scraper. Got all this at Lowe's, just to hopefully make quicker work of this. So I'm just going to come in and see what happens. I don't know if this has done much. Oh, what a mess. You know, I'm going to do, I'm going to paper towel this first. Just get all this loose stuff off. And then we'll come back with the scraper. But, the paper towel is not sticking to the control panel. That's a good sign. Get a little bit more. That is a good sign. And I can see some of it still on, but maybe it's lost a lot of its tackiness. And eventually we'll come back with, some Bondo to fill the gouges in the wood, and we'll sand everything down. And the sandpaper will kind of take the final remnants of any adhesive remaining off of the control panel before we put the eventually new control panel overlay back on. What a mess. Yeah, I still see some of this stuff gumming up. It's a messy job. But, the end result makes it worth it. Okay, well, still lots of goobers that I'm going to need to take off at some point, whether it's with the sander or what, but I think, I don't know, I can still see a bunch here, a bunch of adhesive. So, this gel is certainly a lot more pleasant to work with than the kind of original Goof Off, which wants to run all over. But I'm going to go ahead and do it on the metal side, and I'll come back and show the results after that. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes, so let's come in with some paper towel and wipe up this mess and then see what we got here. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's working as well here. Or maybe, you know, maybe the reason that the gel was working on the wood was because the wood already had most of the adhesive taken off with the original Goof Off. Huh. Well, one way or another, we're going to get all this off. We'll sand it down. We'll get everything repaired. We'll get things ready for reassembly. And I'm going to do everything I can to set this control panel up for me to temporarily install those normal leaf switch joysticks. That way, you know, I can install the control panel overlay, the repro one that I have from this old game, and get everything working in this cabinet so that we can play some Joust. And then if and when I ever find, you know, optical joysticks to use in this cabinet, we can install them easily without having to rip off another control panel overlay and do this process all over, because I definitely don't want to do this more than once. So I think that's going to be the end of it for now. I'll probably come back with some of the original Goof Off and see if I can knock off some more of this adhesive. But that, I think that's going to basically do it for this episode. This was part 2 of the Joust deconversion and restoration project. So yeah, I don't know, you know, if we made that much progress in this episode. What did we do, right? We stripped the control panel overlay, the Street Smart control panel overlay, off of the control panel using a heat gun, and then we did sort of our first best attempt to remove all of the leftover adhesive and gunk from the control panel. And we also investigated some, you know, mysterious stuff going on with this control panel. You know, it's looking like it originally came with those rare optical joysticks, which is both great, because that's cool, right? A little uncommon piece of history, but also challenging. You know, makes this restoration more challenging because we can't use the commonly available parts. And then coming back over here to the cabinet itself, we peeled off the old Street Smart side art from both sides, which came off pretty easily. And we were excited to see, you know, through this paint, you can see some of the original stenciled artwork from the Joust. So that's great. In the next episode, I think what I want to do is tackle the stripping the paint off. So getting all this black and that red paint off of the side of the cabinets, and hopefully, you know, we'll be able to recover that original stenciled Joust artwork. I also want to put some leg levelers on the bottom of the cabinet, so that'll be good. We'll be able to get this cabinet upright and not have to worry about damaging the bottom even further. And we'll see about potentially even attacking the damage here and repairing this with Bondo and getting those corners nice and straight again. And hopefully we'll also get to continue working on this control panel and get that good to go. And then, of course, we've got, you know, a lot of electronics to do. Get the board working, get the monitor, which is right there, you know, recapped and brought back to its full brilliance. So yeah, lots of exciting work to come on this project, and by the end we should have a beautiful Joust cabinet to enjoy. So I think that'll about do it for this episode of Overtime Arcade. As always, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm Charlie, and we'll see you on the next one.
Overtime!